On November 14, 1998, the members of Tectonic Theater Project traveled to Laramie, Wyoming, and conducted over 200 interviews with the people of the town. The play you're about to see is edited from those interviews, as well as from journal entries by members of the company and other found texts. Company member Greg Perotti.
My first interview was with Detective Sergeant Hing of the Laramie Police Department. At the start of the interview, he was sitting behind his desk, sitting like this. I was born and raised here. My family is a third generation. My grandparents moved here in the early 1900s. Quite a while. It's a good place to live. Good people. Lots of space. Now, all the towns in southern Wyoming are laid out and spaced because the railroad came through. It was how far they could go before having to refuel and rewater. And Laramie was a major stopping point. That's why all the towns are spaced so far apart. We're one of the largest states in the country, and the least populated. What you have is you have your old-time, traditional tap ranchers. They've been here forever. And Laramie's been the hub of where they've come for supplies and stuff like that.
I love it here.
Doc O'Connor, limousine driver. He's also not really a doctor.
You can put me back in that mess out there back east. Best thing about it is the climate. The cold, the wind.
It's a good place to live, good people, lots of space. Now, when that incident happened with that boy, a lot of press people came out here. And one time, some of them followed me out to the crime scene, and, well, it was a beautiful day. Absolutely gorgeous day, real clear and crisp, and the sky was just that blue that, you'll never be able to paint. It's just sky blue. And the mountains in the background, a little bit of snow on them. And this one reporter, a lady, a person, that was out there, she said, well, who found the boy? Who was out here anyway? And I said, well, this is really a popular area for people to run. Mountain biking's really big out here, horseback riding. And she looked at me and she said, who would want to run out here? And I'm thinking, lady, you're just missing the point.
It's hard to talk about Laramie now, to tell you what Laramie is for us.
Jedediah Schultz.
If you would have asked me before, I would have told you Laramie is a beautiful town, secluded enough to have its own identity, a town with a strong sense of community. Everyone knows everyone. But now, after Matthew, I would say Laramie is a town defined by an accident. We've become Waco. We've become Jasper. We're a noun, a definition. We may be able to get rid of that, but sure will take a while.
When I first heard that you were thinking of coming here, when you first called me, I wanted to say you've kicked me in the stomach. Why are you doing this to me? But then I thought, that's stupid. You're not doing this to me. And more importantly, I thought about it and decided we've had so much negative closure on this whole thing. And the students really need to talk. When this first happened, they started talking about it. And then the media descended and all dialogue stopped. You know, I really love my students because they are free thinkers. And you may not like what they have to say, and you may not like their opinions because they can be very redneck, but they're honest and they're truthful. So there's an excitement here. There's a dynamic here in Laramie that I never had when I was in the Midwest or North Dakota, because there was so much Puritanism that dictated the way people looked at the world that a lot of the time they didn't have an opinion. You couldn't get them to express an opinion. And quite honestly, I would rather have opinions that I don't like and have that dynamic in an education. There's this student I think you should talk to. His name is Jedediah Schultz.
I've lived in Wyoming my whole life. The family has been in Wyoming, well, for generations. Now, when it came time to go to college, my parents couldn't afford to send me to college. So I knew that if I was going to get in, I was going to have to get a scholarship. And so they had this Wyoming state competition each year. And I knew that if I did a good enough job, I could get in. I wanted to study theater. So I went around looking for good scenes, and I went down to the theater department, and I asked one of the professors, hey, I just need like a killer scene, just like the best scene you have. And he was like, here you go. This is it. And it was from Angels in America. So I read it, and I knew that if I did a good enough job, I could get the scholarship. And when the time came, I told my parents. Now, you have to understand, my parents go to everything. Every hockey game, every ball game, everything I've ever done. And they brought me into their room and told me that if I did that scene, they would not come and see me do it. Because they thought it was wrong. That homosexuality was wrong. They felt that strongly about it, that they wouldn't come see their own son probably do the most important thing in his life. And I didn't know what to do. But I decided to do it. And all I can remember about the competition is that after it, me and my scene partner, we came up to each other and we shook hands. We got a standing ovation. Oh man, it was amazing. I can't even think about how amazing it was. But that's how come I can afford to be here at the university. Because of that scene. It was one of the best moments in my life. And my parents weren't there. And to this day, this is one of the only things that my parents hadn't seen me done. And thinking back on it, I think, why did I do it? Why did I go against my parents' wishes? Because I'm not gay. So why did I do it? And I guess the honest answer is, I wanted to win. It was such a good scene. It was just the best scene. You know, Mr. Kushner, maybe you can tell him.
Greg Perotti.
I met today with two longtime Laramie residents, Allison Mears and Marge Murphy, two social service workers, who taught me a thing or two.
What Laramie used to be like when Marge was growing up? Well, it was mostly rural.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, you know. My kids all had horses.
Well, there was more land. I mean, you could keep your pet cow, your horse, your little chicken. You know, just have your little bit of acreage.
So this was a big ranching town.
Oh, not just ranching. Laramie was a big railroad town at one time, before they moved everything to Cheyenne and Green River and Omaha. So now, well, it's just a drive-through spot for the railroad. Because what was it, in like the 50s? Well, they had one big found house, and they had such a shop they could build a complete engine.
They did. My mom worked there.
Your mom worked in a roundhouse?
Yeah, she washed engines.
But I'll tell you, Wyoming is bad in terms of jobs. I mean, the university has the big whoop-de-doo jobs, but in Wyoming, unless you're professional, well, the bulk of people are working minimum wage jobs.
Yeah, I've been in the service industry or bartending most of my life. Now I know everybody in town.
And she does.
And I do. Now I tell you, here in Laramie, there's a difference, and there always has been. What is a class distinction between the ones that are educated and the ones that are not. And the educated ones don't know why the ones that aren't don't get educated. And that's just always how it's been. And that's why I told you before, my kids had to fight because their mother was a bartender. Never mind. I was the best bartender in town.
And she was.
That's not bragging, that's fact.
But here in Laramie, if it weren't for the university, we'd just be SOL.
So let me ask you, what was your response when this happened to Matthew Shepard?
Well, I've been close enough to this case to know most of the people it's affected. I have a daughter that's on the sheriff's department. And as far as the gay issue, I don't really care as long as they don't bother me. And if they did, I just say no thank you. And that's most of the attitude of the population of Laramie. Laramie is live and let live.
I'd say that Marge probably knows more, except she's not willing to say. And we have to respect her for that.
Well, where are you going with this story?
Oh, well, we still haven't decided. When we're finished, we're going to try to bring it around to Laramie.
Okay, so there are parts I won't tell you.
Company member Lee Fondakowski.
Today, for the first time, we meet somebody who addressed Matthew Shepard as Matt. Trish Steger, owner of a shop in town.
Matt used to come into my shop. That's how I knew him.
This is the first time I've heard him referred to as Matt instead of Matthew. Did he go by Matt to everyone?
Well, on the 2nd of October, I get a phone call about 10 after 7.
Doc O'Connor.
It was Matthew Shepard, and he said, care to pick me up at the corner of 3rd and Grand? So anyhow, I pull up to the corner to see who Matthew Shepard is, So a little guy, about 5'2", betcha 97 pounds tops, soaking wet. Say weighed 110, but I don't believe it. They also said he was 5'5" in the newspapers, but this man, he was really only about 5'2", maybe 5'1". So he walks up to the window. I'm going to try to go in steps so that you can better understand the principle of this man. So he walks up to the window, and I say, are you Matthew Shepard? And he says, yeah, I'm Matthew Shepard. But I don't want you to call me Matthew or Mr. Shepard. I don't want you to call me anything. My name is Matt, and I want you to know that I'm gay and we're going to a gay bar. Do you have a problem with that? And I said, how you paying? The fact is, Laramie doesn't have any gay bars. And for that matter, neither does Wyoming. So he was hiring me to take him down to Fort Collins, Colorado, about an hour away. Matt was blunt. You know what I'm saying? He always was. But I liked him because he was straightforward. You see what I'm saying? Maybe gay, but straightforward. You see what I'm saying?
How does any one person ever tell about another? You really should talk to my sister Romaine. She was a very close friend of Matthew's.
We never called him Matthew, actually. Most of the time we just call him Choo Choo, because we used to call him Matthew, and then we just call him Choo Choo. And whenever I think of Matthew, I always think of his incredible beaming smile. I mean, he'd walk in and he'd be like, he'd smile at everyone. He just made you feel great. Matthew definitely had a political side to him. I mean, he really wanted to get into political affairs. That's all his big interest was watching CNN and MSNBC. I mean, that's the only TV station I ever saw his TV tuned into. He was just really smart in political affairs, but not too smart in, common sense things. And so he moves to Laramie to go to school.
Matthew was very shy when he first came in.
John Peacock, Matthew Shepard's advisor.
To the point of being somewhat mousy, I'd almost say. He was having some difficulties adjusting, but this was home for him, and he made that quite clear. And so his mousiness, his shyness gave way to a person who was excited about this track that he was about to embark on. He was just figuring out wanting to work on human rights and how he was going to do that. And when this happens, this person begins to bloom a little bit. He was starting to say, wow, there are opportunities here. There are things I can do in this world. I can be important.
I did hear from Matthew about 48 hours before his attack, and he told me he had joined the gay and lesbian group on campus, and he said he was enjoying it. He was getting ready for Pride Week and whatnot. He was just totally stoked about school. He was really happy about being there.
And in retrospect, and I can only say this in retrospect, of course, I think that's where he was heading, towards human rights, which only adds to the irony and tragedy of this.
My understanding when I first came here,
Catherine Connolly,
is that I was the first out lesbian or gay faculty member on campus. And that was in 1992. So that wasn't that long ago. I was asked in my interview what my husband did. So I just came out then. Do you want a funny story? Well, when you first get here as a new faculty member, there's all these things you have to do. And so I was sitting in my office and I noticed that this woman called. I was expecting, it was a health insurance phone call, something like that. And so I called her back and I could hear her working, clicking away on her keyboard. And I said, this is Catherine Connolly returning your phone call. She goes, oh, it's you. And I thought, this is bizarre. And she said, I hear you're gay. I hear you are. And I was like, uh-huh. And she said, I hear you came as a couple. I'm one too. Not a couple, just a person. And so she was the kind of lesbian who knew I was coming. and she wanted to come over and meet me immediately. And she later told me that there were other lesbians who wouldn't be seen with me, that I would irreparably taint them, that just to be seen with me could be a problem.
Breakfast this morning with a university student named Zubaida. She's an Islamic feminist, likes to do things her own way.
I've lived in Laramie since I was 4. Yeah, my parents are from Bangladesh. 2 years ago, because I'm Muslim, I decided to start wearing a scarf. That's really changed my life in Laramie. Yeah, like, people say things to me like, why do you have to wear that thing on your head? Like, when I go to the grocery store, I'm not looking to give people Islam 101, you know what I mean? So I'll be like, well, it's a part of my religion. And they'll be, this is the worst part, because they'll be like, I know it's a part of your religion, but why? And it's, how am I supposed to go into the whole doctrine of physical modesty in my own spiritual relationship with the Lord, standing there with my pop and chips? You know what I mean?
I went out to the Fireside Bar, which is the last place Matthew was seen in public. The Fireside definitely feels like a college bar with a couple pool tables and a stage area for karaoke night. Still, the few regulars in the late afternoon were hardly the college crowd. The first person we talked to was Matt Mickelson, the owner.
My great-great-grandfather moved here in 1862. He owned Laramie's first ever opera house called Old Blue Front. And in 1870, Louisa Grandma Swain cast the first women's ballot in any free election in the world. And that's why they call Wyoming the Equality State. So what I want to do is reestablish my bar business as Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Time Emporium. You know, I want to have a restaurant. I want to have a gift shop. I want to have a pool hall and do all of this. You know, every night's ladies' night, so the Fireside is the first step towards the Old Blue Front Opera House and Good Time Emporium.
So what about the night Matthew Shepard was here?
We had karaoke that night, 20 or 30 people all around. Matthew came in sitting right where you are, just hanging out. I mean, if you want to talk to someone, you should talk to Matt Galloway. He was the kid bartending that night. You should meet him. His character stands for itself. Hey, is Galloway bartending tonight?
I'm going to make this brief, quick, get it over with. But it will be everything factual. Just the facts. Here we go. 10 o'clock, I clock in, usual time, Tuesday nights, 10:30. Matthew Shepard shows up alone, sits down. So what can I tell you about Matt? If you had 100 customers like him, it'd be the most perfect bar I've ever been in, okay? And nothing to do with sexual orientation. Absolute mannerisms, manners, politeness, intelligence, taking care of me, as in tips. Everything, conversation, dress nice, clean cut. Some people, just sits down, please, thank you, offers intellect, within their vocabulary. So he kicks it there, didn't seem to have any worries or like he was looking for anyone, just enjoy his drink and the company around. Now, approximately 11:45, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson come in. I didn't know their names then, but they're the accused. They're the pervs. They're the accused. They walked in just very stone-faced, dirty, grungy, rude, gimme, that sort of thing. They walked up to the bar, and as you know, paid for a pitcher with dimes and quarters. Oh, just something that, you don't forget. You don't forget that. $5.50 in dimes and quarters. Now, Henderson and McKinney, they just came in, they took the pitcher with them back there into the pool room, and kept to themselves. Next thing I knew, probably about a half hour later, they were walking around. And I have a real good feeling that they don't have any more money.
Romaine Patterson.
Money meant nothing to Matthew because he came from a lot of it. And he would hand over his wallet in 2 seconds because money meant nothing. His shoes might have meant something. They can say it was robbery. I don't buy it for even an iota of a second.
Then a few moments later, I looked over and Aaron and Russell had been talking to Matthew Shepard. Okay, no. They stated that Matt approached him, that he came on to them. I absolutely, positively disbelieve and refute the statement 100%. Let me give you 2 reasons why. 1, character reference. Why would he approach them? Why them? He wasn't approaching anyone else in the bar. They say he's gay. He's a flaming gay. He's got to fun with people like that. He never came on to me. Hello? He came on to them? I don't believe it. 2. Territorialism is the word that I will use for this. And that's the fact that Matt was sitting there. Aaron and Russell were in the pool area. Upon their first interaction, they were in Matt's area, the area that Matt had been seen in all night. So who approached who by that?
Matthew was the kind of person, like, he would never not talk to someone for any reason. If someone started talking to him, he'd just be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. He never had any problem striking up a conversation with anybody.
So the only thing is, and this is what I'm testifying to, because, I'm basically the key eyewitness in this case. Basically, what I'm testifying is that I saw Matthew leave, and I saw 2 individuals leave with Matthew. And I didn't see their faces, but I saw the back of their heads. At the same time, Aaron and Russell were no longer around. You do the math.
Actually, I think the DJ was the last one to talk to him on his way out that night. His name is Shadow.
I was the last person to talk to Matt before I left for Fireside. I was messing around with my stuff and he walked up to me. Well, I walked up to him actually and he was like, hey, Shadow, da-da-da. I'm like, hey, man, you getting ready to leave? He's like, yeah, man. That's when I noticed him 2 guys standing outside. You could see it. They were looking at him and he was looking back at them. I probably talked to Matt for a good 10 minutes before those guys showed up. They had a look on their face. They were worried or anxious or whatever. I even saw them leave. They got into a truck, a small black one. Matt sat in the middle. I didn't figure those guys were going to be like that.
A friend of Aaron McKinney.
Well, I've known Aaron a long time. Aaron was a good kid. I liked Aaron a lot. That's why I was shocked when I heard this. I'm like, I know he was. He was living out far. At his trailer house is what he told me with his girl. They just started dating last summer. They must have gotten pregnant as soon as they started dating, because they had a kid. He was only 21 years old, but he was running around with a kid. You see, that's the kind of person Aaron was. Like, he just always dressed in, big clothes, and, Tommy Hilfiger, Polo, Gucci. At the time I knew him, he was just a young kid trying, he just wanted to fit in, acting tough, acting cool, but, you get in his face about it, and he would back down like he was some kind of scared kid.
Sherry Annenson.
Russell was just so sweet. He was the one who was the Eagle Scout. I mean, his whole presence was just quiet and sweet, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I know people snap and whatever, and we didn't really have a real intimate relationship. I was just his landlord. I did work with him at the truck wagon too, and I remember, at the Christmas party, I remember him coming up to me and saying, when you get a chance, Sherry, can I have a dance? Which we never did get around to doing that. But now I just want to shake him, What were you thinking? What were you thinking?
So I took off on my bike around 5 p.m. on Wednesday from my dorm. I just felt like going for a ride, So I went up to Cactus Canyon, and I'm not super familiar with the area. So on my way back down, I was just sort of picking and choosing which way to go, which now just makes me think, why did God want me to find him? Because there was no way I was going to go down that way. I mean, I was in some deep sand and I wanted to turn around, but for some reason I didn't. And as I went along, there was this rock on the ground, and I just drilled it, hands over handlebars, and I ended up on the ground. And I got up, I dusted myself off, and I noticed something, which ended up to be Matt. I mean, I thought it was a scarecrow. I thought it was some sort of Halloween gag, so I didn't think much of it. So I got my bike and I walked it around the fence. It was a buck type fence. And I noticed hair. And that was the major key to me, noticing that it was a human being, was hair. I mean, I even saw the chest going up and down, and I thought it was some sort of mechanism. But when I saw hair, I knew it was a human being. So I ran to the nearest house, and
I just called the police. And it's kind of unbelievable to me, that I happen to be the person to find him. Because, I mean, the big question with me and my religion is like, why did God want me to find him?
I responded to the call.
Officer Reggie Flutie.
When I got there, at first, the only thing I could see was partially somebody's feet. So I got out of my vehicle and raced over. I'd seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14 years old, because he was so tiny, laying on his back, and he was tied to the bottom end of the pole. I did the best I could. The gentleman lying there, Matthew Shepard, he was covered in dry blood all over his head. There was dry blood underneath him, and he was barely breathing. He was doing the best he could. I was going to breathe for him, and I couldn't get his mouth open. His mouth wouldn't open for me. He was covered in, like I said, partially dry blood and blood all over his face and head. The only place he didn't have on his face was what appeared to be where he'd been crying down his face. His head was distorted. It didn't look normal. It looked as if he had a real harsh head wound.
I was working the emergency room the night Matthew Shepard was brought in. I don't think that anyone can remember seeing a patient in that condition for a long time. Those of us who've worked in big city hospitals have seen this, but we have some people here who've not worked in a big city hospital, and it's not something you expect here. You expect it. You expect these kind of injuries from a car going down a hill at 80 miles an hour. You expect to see gross injuries from something like that. But you don't expect to see that from someone doing this to another person. The ambulance report said it was a beating, so we knew.
He was tied to the fence. His hands were thumbs out in what we call a cuffing position, the way we handcuff people. He was bound with a real thin white rope. It went around the bottom end of the pole about 4 inches up off the ground. His shoes were missing. He was tied extremely tight. So I got my foot knife and I tried to slip between the rope and his wrist. I had to be extremely careful not to hurt Matthew any further.
Your first thought is, well, you'd certainly like to think that it's somebody from out of town that comes through and beats somebody. I mean, things like this happen, stuff happens, and it happens in Laramie, but if there's been somebody who's been beaten repeatedly, certainly this is something that offends us. I think that's a good word. It offends us.
He was bound so tight. I finally got the knife through there, and I'm sorry. We rolled him over on his left side. When we did that, he quit breathing. Immediately, I put him back on his back, and that was just enough an adjustment, and it gave me enough room to cut him free. I had seen the EMS trying to get to the location. Once the ambulance unit got there, we put a neck collar on him, placed him on a backboard, and scooted him from underneath the fence. And then Rob drove him to Ivinson's Hospital's emergency room.
Now, the strange thing is, 20 minutes before Matthew came in, Aaron McKinney was brought in by his girlfriend. Now, I guess he had gotten into a fight later on that night back in town, so I'm working with Aaron, and the ambulance comes in with Matthew. Now, at this point, I don't know that there's a connection at all, so I tell Aaron to wait, and I go and treat Matthew. So there's Aaron in one room of the ER, and Matthew in another room 2 doors down. Now, as soon as we saw Matthew, it was very obvious that his care was beyond our capabilities. Called the neurosurgeon at Poudre Valley, and he was on the road in an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
They showed me a picture. Days later, I saw a picture of Matthew. I would have never recognized him.
2 days later, I found out the connection, and I was very struck. They were 2 kids. They were both my patients, and they were 2 kids. I took care of both of them, of their bodies, and for a brief moment, I wondered if this is how God felt when he looks down at us, how we are all his children, our bodies, our souls, and I felt a great deal of compassion for both of them.
This is John Peacock, Matthew's academic advisor.
Well, the news reports started trickling out on Thursday, but no names were mentioned. The brutality of the crime was not mentioned. All that was mentioned that there was a man, a Laramie man, found beaten out on the prairie, basically. Later on in the evening, they mentioned his name. It was like, that can't. That's not the Matthew Shepard I know. That's not my student. That's not the person who I've been meeting with.
I was in the coffee shop.
Romaine Patterson.
And someone pulled me aside, said I don't know much, but they say there's been a young man who's been beaten in Laramie. And they said his name was Matthew Shepard. And he said, do you think this could be our Matthew? And I said, well, yeah, it sounds like it could be our Matthew. And so I called up my sister Trish and I said, tell me what you know. I'm just like, I need to know anything you know because I don't know anything.
I'm talking to my sister on the phone, and that's when the whole story came up on Channel 5 News. And it was just like, ba-boom.
And the news reports kept rolling in. Young University of Wyoming student, his age, his description. It's like, oh my God.
I felt sick to my stomach. It's just instantly sick to my stomach. And I had to tell Romaine, yes, it was Matthew. It was your friend.
Well, I'll tell you. It's overwhelming.
Matt Galloway.
Friday morning, I first found out about it. I go to class, walk out, and boom, there it is, and they're in the branding iron. So I drive to the nearest newsstand, buy a Laramie boomerang because I want more details. Buy that, go home. But before I can even open the paper, my boss calls me. He says,
Did you hear about what happened?
I'm like, yeah.
Well, was he in the bar Tuesday night?
I go, yes. Yes, he was.
Well, you gotta get down to the bar. We gotta discuss what's going on.
By this time, I was starting to get upset, but still the severity wasn't out yet.
It was a Thursday afternoon.
Rulon Stacy at Poudre Valley Hospital.
I got a call. We just got a kid in from Wyoming, and it looks like he may be the victim of a hate crime. We have a couple of newspaper reporters here asking questions, and so we agreed that we needed a spokesperson. As CEO, I will do that, and we will try and gather all the information that we can.
And then I watched the 10 o'clock news that night, where they started speaking about the nature and the seriousness of it.
So I'm on the phone with Mickelson, and he's like,
Need to go down to the arraignment to make sure those were the guys that were at the bar.
so we go to the arraignment.
Today turns to Laramie, Wyoming, and the Albany County Courthouse, where Aaron James McKinney and Russell Arthur Henderson are being charged for the brutal beating of Matthew Shepard, a gay University of Wyoming student.
The arraignment was on Friday, right around lunchtime, and I said, I'm just going. I just took off. It's just down the street, so I walked a few blocks and I went. Has anybody told you about the arraignment? Well, there were probably about 100 people from town and probably as many news people by that point. A lot more of the details had come out. The fact that the perpetrators were kids themselves, local kids who everyone who's from around here has some relationship to. And when I think everyone was just waiting on pins and needles for what would happen when the perpetrators walked in. And what happened? There's 200 people in the room by this point, and they walked in their complete orange jumpsuits and their shackles, and you could have heard a pin drop. It was incredibly solemn. I mean, a lot of people were teary by that point. And then the judge came in and did a reading. There's a reading of the evidence that the prosecution has, and it's a statement of facts. And the reading of the facts was,
The essential facts are that the defendants, Aaron James McKinney and Russell Arthur Henderson, met Matthew Shepard at the Fireside Bar, and after Mr. Shepard confided he was gay, the subjects deceived Mr. Shepard into leaving with them in their vehicle to a remote area. Upon arrival at said area, both subjects tied their victim to a buck fence, robbed him, tortured him, and beat him. Both defendants were later contacted by officers of the Laramie Police Department who observed, inside the cab of their pickup, a credit card and a pair of black patent leather shoes belonging to the victim, Matthew Shepard. The subjects took the victim's credit card, wallet containing $20 in cash,
his shoes, and other items and obtained the victim's address in order to later burglarize his home.
I don't think there was any person who was left in that courtroom who wasn't crying at the end of it. I mean, it lasted only 5 minutes, but it kept on getting more and more horrific, ending with
Said defendants left the victim begging for his life.
How could this happen? I think a lot of people just don't understand, and even I don't really understand how someone can do something like that. We have one of the most vocal gay populations in the state, and it's pretty much live and let live.
So that was the arraignment. And my response was pretty catatonic. Not sleeping, not eating. Just don't leave me alone right now.
More and more details came in about the sheer brutality, motivations, how this happened. And then, quite frankly, the media descended, and there was no time to reflect on it anymore.
Laramie, Wyoming, also the Gem State of the Plains, is now the eye of the storm. The Cowboy State has its rednecks and yahoos for sure, but there are no more bigots per capita in Wyoming than there is in New York, Florida, or California. The difference is that in Wyoming, there's few places to blend in if you're anything other than prairie stock.
Kinney and his friend Russell Henderson came from the poor side of town. Both were from broken homes and as teenagers had run-ins with the law. They lived in trailer parks and scratched out a living working at fast food restaurants and fixing roofs.
People would like to think that what happened to Matthew was an exception of the rule, but is an extreme version of what happens at our schools on a daily basis.
I'll tell you what, when hard copy came and taped me, I taped them at the exact same time. I have every word I ever said on tape. So if they ever do anything funny, they better watch their butts.
Wyoming Governor Jim Geringer, a first-term Republican up for re-election.
I am sickened and outraged by the heinous crime committed on Matthew Shepard. I extend my most heartfelt sympathy to the family.
Governor, you haven't put in the past.
I would like to urge the people of Wyoming not to overreact in a way that gives one group special rights over the others. We will wait and see if the vicious beating and torture of Matthew Shepard was indeed motivated by hate.
Bill McKinney, father of one of the accused.
Had this been a heterosexual that these two boys decided to take out and rob, this would have never made national news, and now my son is guilty before he's even had a trial.
At 3 p.m. Saturday, October 10th.
By this point, I looked out there and there had to have been 2 or 3 reporters, another 10 or 15 still photographers, another 20 or 30 reporters, and 10 video cameras. The parents had just arrived. I had barely introduced myself to them. I looked out there and I thought, my gosh, what am I going to do? Matthew Shepard was admitted in critical condition at approximately 7:15 p.m. October 9th. When he arrived, he was unresponsive and breathing support was being provided. Matthew's major injuries upon arrival consisted of hypothermia and a fracture from behind his head to just in front of the right ear. This has caused bleeding in the brain as well as pressure in the brain, and there were also several lacerations on his head, face, and neck. Matthew's temperature has fluctuated over the past 24 hours, ranging from 98 to 106 degrees. We have had difficulty controlling his temperature. Matthew's parents arrived at 9 p.m. on October 7th and are now at his bedside. The following is a statement from them. First of all, we want to thank the American people for their kind thoughts about Matthew and their fond wishes for his speedy recovery. We appreciate your prayers and goodwill, and we know that they are something Matthew would appreciate too. We also have a special request for the members of the media. Matthew is very much in need of his family at this time, and we ask that you respect our privacy as well as Matthew's so that we may concentrate all of our efforts, thoughts, and love onto our son. Thank you very much.
Both Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson pled not guilty to charges. Their girlfriends, Chastity Paisley and Kristen Price, also pled not guilty after being charged as accessories after the fact.
One of the things that happened when I got to the fence.
Reggie Flutie.
It was just such an overwhelming amount of blood. And we tried to wear protective gloves, but we had this really cheap sheriff at the time, and he bought us these crap gloves. So, you put them on and you put them on, and they keep breaking. So finally, you just ran out of gloves. So you figure, don't hesitate. That's what your mind tells you to do all the time. So you keep moving and you try to help Matthew and find an airway. That's just what you do.
Reggie's my daughter.
Marge Murray.
And when she first told me she wanted to be a police officer, well, I thought there wasn't a better job for her. She could handle whatever came her way.
Probably a day and a half later, the hospital called. They said Matthew had HIV. They said you've been exposed, and you've had a bad exposure. You see, I'd been building a lean-to for my llamas, and my hands had a bunch of open cuts on them. And you think, oh shoot,
Would you like to think about losing sleep?
So I said to the doctor, what do I do? And they said, get up here. So I got up there, and we started the ATC drugs immediately.
Now, they told me there's a medication administered 36 hours after you've been exposed. It can maybe stop your getting the disease.
Yeah, that is a mean, nasty medicine. I've lost 10 pounds and a lot of my hair. Yeah.
And quite frankly, I wanted to lash out at somebody. Not at Matthew. Please understand that. Not one of us was mad at Matthew. It's just maybe wanted to squeeze McKinney's head off. And I think about Henderson. Two absolute human beings cause so much grief for so many people. This has been terrible for my whole family, but mostly for Reggie and her kids.
I think it really brought home to my daughters what their mom does for a living.
Well, Reggie, you know what I'm going to tell you now.
And my parents, they told me, they both said the same thing.
You're quitting this job.
And it's just a parent thing, because they're terribly proud of you, because you do a good job. They don't want to see you getting hurt.
Like I said, there's a right way, a wrong way, and then there's Reggie's way.
So finally I said, oh, for God's sakes, lighten up, Francis.
You are so stubborn.
They say I'm stubborn. I don't believe them because, well, okay. I've heard your opinion. Now here's mine. I'm 39 years old. What are you going to do? Spank me?
Reggie, don't give me any ideas.
It looked pretty funny. What can they say?
I just hope she doesn't go before me. I just couldn't handle that.
University of Wyoming President Philip Dubois.
Well, this is a young person who read my statement on the Denver Post story and wrote an email to me directly. It said, "You and the straight people of Laramie and Wyoming are guilty of the beating of Matthew Shepard, just as the Germans who looked the other way are guilty of the deaths of the Jews, the Gypsies, and the homosexuals. You have taught your straight children to hate their gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, unless and until you acknowledge that Matt Shepard's beating is not just a random occurrence, not just the work of a couple of random crazies. You have Matthew's blood on your hands. And I just can't begin to tell you what that does to you. You can't possibly know what I'm thinking. You can't possibly know what this has done to me, and my family, and my community."
That first week alone, vigils for Matthew Shepard were held in Laramie, Denver, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs, soon after in Minneapolis and Portland, Maine, among others. In Los Angeles, 5,000 people gathered, and in New York City, a political rally ended in civil disobedience and hundreds of arrests were made, and the Poudre Valley Hospital received close to 1 million visitors from across the country and around the world, all expressing hope for Matthew's recovery.
There are certain things when I sit in church,
Jedediah Schultz.
and the Reverend will tell you flat out that he doesn't agree with homosexuality. And I don't know. I don't know if I know enough about a certain things to make a decision that says homosexuality is right when you've been raised your entire life that it's wrong. I don't think that's how God intended it, but I don't hate homosexuals.
There's more gays around than what you think.
Murdoch Cooper.
It doesn't bother anybody because most of them are gay or lesbian. They know who to talk to. If you step out of line, you're asking for it. Some people are saying you made a pass at them. You don't pick up regular people. I'm not excusing their actions, but it made me feel better because it's partially Matthew Shepard's fault and partially the guys who did it. You know, maybe it's a 50-50.
This whole idea, you leave me alone, I leave you alone.
Harry Woods.
And it's even in some Western literature, you know, live and let live. That is such crap. I tell my friends that. Even my gay friends bring it up sometimes. I'm like, that is crap, you know? I mean, basically what it boils down to. If I don't tell you I'm a fag, you won't beat the crap out of me. I mean, what's so great about that? That's a great philosophy.
We went to the candle vigil.
Zubada Ula.
And it was so good to be with people who felt bad. I kept feeling like I don't deserve to feel this bad, you know? And someone got up there and said, he said, blah, 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 blah. And then he said, I'm saying it wrong, but basically he said, come on, guys, let's show the world that Laramie is not this kind of a town. But it is that kind of a town. If it wasn't this kind of a town, then why did this happen here? I mean, you know what I mean, like, that's a lie because it happened here. So how could it not be a town where this kind of thing happens? Like, that's just totally like looking at an Escher painting and getting all confused. Like, it's just totally like circular logic. Like, how can you even say that? And we have to mourn this, and we have to be sad that we live in a town, a state, a country where stuff like this happens. I mean, these are people trying to distance themselves from this crime. And we need to own this crime, I feel. Everyone needs to own it. We're like this. We are like this.
I was at the Fireside Bar one afternoon when I ran into two friends of Erin McKinney, Shannon and Jen. You knew Erin well, right?
Yeah, we both did. When I first found out, I thought it was really, really awful. But Matthew had money. He had better clothes than I did. Matthew was rich. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, said the wrong things. And I don't know. I won't lie to you, there was times that I thought about going out and robbing. I mean, I never did. But yeah, I was there. It's easy money.
Erin's done that kind of thing before. They've both done it. I know one night they went to Cheyenne to go do it, and they came back with like $300. I don't know if they ever chose like gay people as their particular targets or anything, but anyone that they could outnumber or overpower was fair game.
Do you think there was any homophobia at all involved that could have contributed to some of it?
Probably. It probably would have pissed him off that Matthew was gay because he didn't like the gay people I seen him interact with. No, he was fine as long as, you know, as long as I didn't hit on him, as long as it didn't come up.
And do you get the impression that he knew other gay people?
I'm sure he knew people that are gay. I mean, he worked up at KFC, and there are a couple of people up there that, yeah. Look, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, because I don't know, half the people I know here in Laramie are gay.
And what would you guys say to Erin if you could see him right now?
If I saw Erin now, I'd probably be like, man, why did you mess up like that? But I'd want to make sure he's doing good in there. I'm sure he is, though. I think I would just want to hang out with him.
And you both went to Laramie High.
Yeah, can't you tell? We're a product of our society.
On a day that is traditionally given over to nothing more profound than college exuberance and the fortune of the University of Wyoming football team, this community on the High Plains had a different kind of homecoming Saturday, as many searched their souls in the wake of a vicious, apparent, anti-gay hate crime.
University President Philip Dubois.
This was homecoming weekend. There were a lot of people in town, and there was a homecoming parade scheduled. And then the students organized to tag onto the back of it. You know, behind the banner supporting Matt. And everybody wearing the armbands the students had created.
Harry Woods.
And my apartment has windows on two opposite streets. One goes north and one goes south. and that is exactly the homecoming parade route. Now, on the day of the parade, I had a cast on my leg because of a fall, so I was very disappointed because I really wanted to walk with people that were marching for Matthew, but I couldn't. So I watched my window, and it was just, I'm 52 years old and I'm gay, and I've lived here for many years, and I've seen a lot. And I was very moved when I saw the tag at the end of the homecoming parade, about 100 people walking behind a banner for Matthew. So then the parade went down to the end of the block to make a U-turn, and I went to the other side of my apartment to wait for it to come down the south end of the street.
I was right up there in front where they were holding the banner for Matthew. And let me tell you, I've never had goosebumps so much in my life. It was incredible. A mass of people, families, just amazing. I mean, it was absolutely one of the most beautiful things I've ever done in my life.
Well, about 10 minutes went by, and sure enough, the parade started coming down the street. And then I noticed the most incredible thing. As the parade started coming down the street, the number of people walking for Matthew Shepard had grown 5 times. There were at least 500 people marching for Matthew, and the tag at the end was larger than the entire parade. And people kept joining in. And you know what? I started to cry. Tears were streaming down my face. And I thought, thank God for what I got to see in this lifetime. And my second thought was, thank you, Matthew.
I really haven't been all that involved, per se. My husband's a highway patrolman, so that's really the only way that I've known about it. And when I first found out, I just thought it was awful. I can't, nobody deserves that. I don't care who you are. But the other thing that was not brought out, at the same time that happened, that patrolman was killed. And there was nothing. They didn't say anything about the old man that killed him. He was driving down the road, and he shouldn't have been driving, and killed him. It was just a little piece in the paper, and we lost one of our guys. You know, my husband worked with him. This man was brand new on the force, but I mean, here's one of ours, and it's just a little piece in the paper. And a lot of it is my feeling that the media is portraying Matthew Shepard as a saint, and making him as a martyr. And I don't think he was. I don't think he was that pure. Now, I didn't know him, but there's so many things that I found out about him. It's scary. You know about his character and spreading AIDS and a few other things. I know, being the kind of person that he was just a barfly, you know? And I think he pushed himself around. I think he flaunted it. Everybody's got problems. But why they exemplified him, I don't know. What's the difference if you're gay? A hate crime is a hate crime. If you murder somebody, you hate him. It has nothing to do with if you're gay or a prostitute or whatever. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Company member Lee Fondakowski.
This is one of our last days on our second trip to Laramie. Greg and I have been conducting interviews nonstop, and we are exhausted.
We are to meet Father Roger, a Catholic priest, at 7:30 in the morning. I was wishing we could skip it altogether, but we have to follow it through to the end.
Matthew Shepard has served us well, and I'm not going to sit here and say I was this bold guy, no fear. I was scared, but I was also very vocal in this community when this all happened. And I thought, maybe I should go to the bishop and ask to go legal. But you know what? Heck no. I'm not going to do that. The bishop's permission doesn't make this correct. I mean, I'm not knocking the bishop, but what is correct is correct. You people are just on a search through, but I will do this. I will trust you that if you do this, you'll say it right. Say it correct. Think what they did to Matthew was violence? It was violence. But it's also violence whenever you're called a fag or a les or whatever.
Or a dyke.
Dyke. Yeah, dyke. That is the very seed of violence. And I would resent you immensely if you used anything I said here today to cultivate that kind of violence. I would resent you immensely. You need to know that.
Thank you, Father, for saying that.
Just deal with what is true. You know what is true. Try your best to say it correct.
At 12 midnight, Monday, October 12th, Matthew Shepard's blood pressure began to drop. We immediately notified his family, who were already at the hospital. At 12:53 a.m., Matthew Shepard died. His family was at his bedside. The family again asked me to express their sincerest gratitude to the entire world for the overwhelming support for their son. They were thankful that they did not have to make the decision whether or not to continue life support for their son. Like a good son who was caring to the end and removed all guilt or stress from the family. He came into the world premature and he left the world premature, Matthew's mother said. She also said, go home, give your kids a hug, and don't let a day go by without telling them that you love them.
I'll tell you what, if they put those two boys to death, that would defeat everything Mal would be thinking about on them. Because Mal would not want those two to die. You want to leave them with hope. Hope. Just like the whole world hoped that Mal would survive. The whole thing, you see, the whole thing ropes around hope. Hope.
The day of the funeral, it was snowing so bad, big, huge, wet snowflakes. And when I got there were two churches, one for family, invited guests, people of that nature, and then one church for everyone else who wanted to be there. And then still, hundreds of people outside who couldn't fit into either of the churches. And there's a big park by the church, and that's where these people were. And this park was full.
My most striking memory from the funeral.
Carrie Drake, Crisper Star Tribune.
Is seeing Reverend Fred Phelps from Kansas. That scene go up in the park. A bunch of high school kids who got out early came over and started yelling at some of the people in the protest. The Fred Phelps people. And across the street you had people lining up for the funeral. Well, I remember this one guy. I remember this skidhead. He was dressed in leather and spikes, and he came over from across the street where the protest was, and he came into the crowd. And I just thought, oh, this is going to be a really ugly confrontation. But instead, he came over, and he started leading them in amazing grace.
6 months later, the company returned to Laramie for the trial of Russell Henderson, the first of the two perpetrators. It was to be a capital murder trial. When we got to the Albany County Courthouse, Fred Phelps was already there, but so was Romaine Patterson.
After seeing Fred Phelps protesting at Matthew's funeral, and finding out he was coming to Laramie for the trial of Russell Henderson, I decided that someone needed to stand toe-to-toe with this guy and show the differences. And I think at times like this, when we're talking about hatred as much as the nation is right now, that someone needs to show that there is a better way of dealing with that kind of hatred. So our idea is just like angels. And so we designed an angel outfit. And our wings are huge. And there will be 10 to 20 of us that are angels. And what we're going to do is we're going to encircle Phelps. And because of our big wings, we're going to completely block him. So this big band of angels comes in and we don't say a word. We just turn our backs to him and we stand there. And we are a group of people bringing forth a message of peace and love and compassion. And we're calling it angel action. Yeah, this 21-year-old little lesbian is ready to walk the line with him. And I knew my angels were going to be taking the brunt of everything he had to yell and say. I mean, we were going to be blocking his view. And he was going to be angry. So I went on and bought all my angels' earplugs.
Trish Stegger.
As soon as they started the jury selection, everybody was coming to my shop with, I don't want to be on this trial, I hope I don't get called, or, oh my god, I've been called, how do I get off? Just trying to get as far away from it as I could. Very fearful they were going to have to be part of that jury. And then I heard Henderson had to sit in the courtroom while they questioned respective jurors. And one of the questions they asked is, would you be willing to put this person to death? And I understand a lot of the comments were yes. I would. Well, you can imagine hearing that, juror after juror after juror.
You entered a not guilty plea earlier, Mr. Henderson, but I understand that you wish to change that today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You understand, Mr. Henderson, that the recommended sentence here is 2 life sentences.
Yes, sir.
You understand that those may run concurrently or they may run consecutively.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Henderson, I will now ask how you wish to plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, you have a constitutional right to make a statement if you choose to do so. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I would, Your Honor. Mr. and Miss Shepherd, there is not a moment that goes by that I don't see what happened that night. I know what I did was wrong, and I regret greatly what I did. You have my greatest sympathy for what happened, and I hope one day you will find it in your hearts to forgive me. Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. I'm very sorry for what I did. and I'm ready to pay my debt for what I did.
Mr. Henderson, you drove the vehicle that took Matthew Shepard to his death. You bound him to that fence in order that he may be more savagely beaten, and in order that he may not escape to tell his tale. You left him out there for 18 hours, knowing full well he was there, perhaps even having the opportunity to save his life, and you did nothing. Mr. Henderson, this court does not believe you feel any true remorse for your part in this matter, and I wonder whether you will ever understand the gravity of what you've done. The court finds it appropriate, therefore, that the sentencing be ordered as follows. As to count 3, that being felony murder with robbery, you are to serve a period of imprisonment for the term of your natural life. On count 1, kidnapping, you are to serve a period of imprisonment for the term of your natural life. Sentencing for count 1 to run consecutive to sentencing for count 3.
Well, you're tested every 3 months.
Reggie Flutie.
And I was able to have the DNA test done, so they got me to Fort Collins, they drew blood there, flew it to Michigan, and did all the DNA work, and which was a week later. I knew I was negative for good.
I'll tell you, we were all on our hands and knees saying Hail Marys.
You were just elated, you know, you think, thank God, you think, I hope I did it with some kind of integrity, and you were just really happy, and my daughters just bawled.
They were so happy.
And the force?
Oh boy.
Everybody hugged and cried, and I kissed everybody who walked through that door.
Reggie, they don't need to know that.
I didn't care if they were male or female. They each got a kiss on the lips.
Now what part of what I just said did you not understand?
Oh, get over it, Ma.
Aaron McKinney was found guilty of felony murder, which meant the jury could give him the death penalty. That evening, Judy and Dennis Shepard were approached by McKinney's defense team, who pled for their client's life. The prosecution indicated that they would defer to the family's wishes as whether or not to pursue the death penalty. The following morning, Dennis Shepard made a statement to the court. Here is some of what he said.
My son Matthew did not look like a winner. He was rather uncoordinated and wore braces from the age of 13 until the day he died. I keep wondering the same thing that I did when I saw him in the hospital. What would he have become? How would he have changed his piece of the world to make it better? Matt officially died in a hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. But he actually died on the outskirts of Laramie, tied to a fence. You, Mr. Henderson, with your friend, Mr. McKinney, left him out there, all by himself. But he wasn't alone. He had his lifelong friends with him. Friends that he had grown up with. You're probably wondering who these friends were. First, he had the beautiful night sky and the same stars and moon that we used to see through a telescope together. Then, he had the daylight and the sun to shine on him. And all the while, he was breathing in the scent of snowy pine trees from the snowy range. He heard the wind, the ever-present Wyoming wind. And for the last time, he had one other friend with him. He had God. And I feel better knowing he wasn't alone. Matt's beating, hospitalization, and funeral brought worldwide attention on hate. Good is coming out of evil. People have said enough is enough. I miss my son, but I am proud to be able to say that he is my son. This is the time to begin the healing process, to show mercy to someone who didn't show any mercy at all. Mr. McKinney, I'm going to grant you life. As hard as it is for me to do so because of Matthew. Every time you wake up in your prison cell, remember that you had the opportunity and the ability to stop your actions that night. You robbed me of something very precious. And I will never forgive you for that, Mr. McKinney. I give you life in memory of the one who no longer lives.
Well, a year ago, I wanted to be a rock star. That was my goal. And now well, now it's obviously changed in the fact that throughout the last year I really realized my role in taking my part. So now, instead of going to school to be in music, I'm going to school for communications and political science because I have a career in political activism. Actually, I just recently found out that I was going to be honored in Washington, D.C. from the Anti-Defamation League. And whenever I think about the Angels or any of the speaking that I've done, Matthew's like guiding this little path with his light for me to walk down. And he just, every time we get to like a door, he opens it and he just says, okay, next step. And if I get to be a rock star on the side, okay.
I've been up to that side of my limousine, okay? And I remembered to myself the night he and I drove around together. He said to me, Laramie sparkles, doesn't it? And where he was up there, if you sit exactly where he was up there, Laramie sparkles from there with a low-lying cloud. It's the blue lights that's bouncing off the clouds from the airport. It goes tss, 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 right over the whole city. I mean, it blows you away. Matt was right there in that spot. And I can just picture in his eyes, I can just picture what he was seeing. The last thing he saw on this earth was the sparkling lights.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound